just want to welcome everyone to the webinar tonight for those of you in the US and today for those in Australia. That is where I'm based from, and that's my accent. It's not an East Texan accent, if you couldn't pick it up. But look, I wanted to welcome everyone. My name is Chris Ventura. I'm the CEO of Harness Projects. We're an education company specializing in cybersecurity training. It's really great to see some familiar names in the attendee list, and I think some new ones as well as we start this webinar. So for those joining us for the first time, Harness Projects really takes education beyond the traditional learning. We focus on doing, and it's through our real project learning model where students tackle actual cybersecurity challenges posed by leading companies. This immersive approach doesn't just equip our students with the essential skills, but it ensures they gain that practical real-world experience as they learn. We have our next career launcher course in cybersecurity set to begin later this month. This is an 8-month journey, which includes 3 live projects with diverse companies and a 4th simulated project to really solidify your learning. Each of the panelists we have today are directly involved as mentors in these projects. And with only a few spots left, including some scholarship opportunities, I really encourage you to reach out if you wanted to chat about the course or learn more. I'll be providing a link in the chat shortly and happy to also answer questions at the end of the webinar. So for today's webinar, the topic is how to land your first cybersecurity role. And I've invited 2 incredible industry cyber professionals to help us. And they are also mentors at Harness Projects, and they're going to share their insights with you and answer any questions throughout the sessions that you have. So first, I'd love to welcome Efrain Orsini, Head of Security Operations at QAD Redzone. Efrain, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you're currently doing in cyber and at QAD?
Yeah, sure. So as Chris said, I am the head of security operations at Redzone. I kind of have a little dual hat now as we were purchased by QAD. So I am also the security operations director on the QAD side. Essentially, I do the same thing for both positions, but I lead a team that focuses on all of our internal security. We do phishing programs, we do SIM and SOAR checks to make sure our company's not getting hacked or having any breaches, which is always a cross your fingers thing. As well as looking into new products and doing a few different things now. So in a nutshell, that's kind of what I do now. I'm sure more will come up as we go along.
Awesome. Thanks for the intro, mate. And I also want to welcome Austin Phillips. He's the Security Engineering Manager at DataScan. Welcome, Austin. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your world in cyber?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So my name is Austin Phillips. I'm, like you said, a Security Engineering Manager. And really, my team focuses across 4 real key pillars. We can kind of break it down across, which is identity access management, handling who's allowed in, what kind of privilege they have, who can actually access certain, privileged or special credentials, special access, vulnerability management. So whether that's actually scanning, our code itself or in the runtime, we handle those aspects. Infrastructure and architecture. So constantly working through implementing new tools, new platforms, new programs. And then also incident response, which is really the key one that, like Efrain said, that the biggest thing, with security is there's always going to be the next big incident or the next big thing. The best thing you do is prepare for it. And so a lot of my job and a lot of my team's job is preparing for that next thing. So that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. Thank you, Austin. Nice to have you both with us and appreciate your time. So for everyone in attendance, the format of this webinar is going to be a Q&A session. So I'll be asking each of the panelists questions that may help reveal advice on how to break into your first cybersecurity role. And we really welcome each of you to submit your own questions to the panel. I'll try to get to as many of them as possible. To make things easier, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to submit your questions. And we'll go through them try to keep it in a category, but I'll do my best to get to all of them. Okay, so just to kick things off, I wanted to just start with perhaps a funny story that either of you might have come across in your recruitment time in cyber. Have you what would be, say, the funniest or most creative thing you've seen someone do in an interview or write on a resume? Love to hear if anything has come across your desk like that.
I'm gonna let Austin answer this one.
Yeah. So I think, a great story to start with is that EJ and I actually used to work together, and we were in an interview together at one point, interviewing a candidate. We had someone from our engineering team partner with us in that interview. And the most interesting question we've ever heard came across in this interview, where they asked the candidate, if you had a single light bulb in a room that was on and you had to turn it off, and there's no light switch, there's no door, there's no window, and there's nothing to help assist to turn off that light, how do you turn the light off? And I understand where he's coming from with that question, but it really just kind of sat there thinking, where is he really going with this? And really it just ended with the guys like, well, I'm just going to take my shoe off and hit the light bulb. So it's just one of those really interesting questions that I've never been a fan of, but we had a good crack up about it.
The old gotcha questions. Was there like a trick answer to that question, or?
No, he never followed up with it.
So we're left wondering.
Never was a good answer to the question. So I think to this day, Austin and I still don't know how to turn off that light bulb.
Right.
And neither did any of the people we hired or did not hire.
Got it. I don't think you guys are going to have to worry too much about those types of questions, but you never know. You might get the odd light bulb question. Cool. Well, maybe just to start with, for the webinar, let's dive into some of the skills that are important to be comfortable with or familiar with when looking for your first cyber role. So if I had to ask you guys, what are some of the foundational cybersecurity skills that every sort of early stage beginner should learn?
Yeah, and I could start with that. And really, something that's followed my career, what I really try to impart on people joining is, you don't have to, know all the technical pieces out the gate. Nobody expects you to. I think being really honest and transparent and having soft skills to say, I don't know the answer to that question, but I can go and find it, is huge. Having that humility and that, understanding to be ignorant and not know the answer is okay. Soft skills in general is really just such an important part to the role that I think a lot of people miss. They focus so hard on the technical that you really miss kind of that human to human interaction that I think helps really anybody truly succeed in the role, because you need to be able to talk to, whether it's the technical folks that you're working with, the C-suite that you need to be engaged with, and then dumbing down those answers sometimes to where they can understand it so they can understand the risk, and being able to form true, connections and human relationships with people that you work with to really succeed.
Anything to
Yeah,
add?
I also agree with Austin on that. I think the soft skills, which if some of you are here from the last time, we talked about that a bunch, but I think that's something to not forget. Soft skills are really important in this position, way more than they used to be, which I'm sure we'll talk about in another question. But gone are the days where like you as the technical person are only behind the keyboard and just pounding away and not talking to anyone, right? With all these different things and everybody coming in, you're expected to kind of be able to speak a little bit more and do a little more things with communication. So I think that's really important. If I had to choose one technical thing that I think you should start with, I would always say start with the OSI model. Just kind of understand the different layers of it. I'm not super technical at this point in my career, but the OSI model is pretty important, and I think it gives a great foundation for anything you do within cybersecurity, within IT, with any of these technical things now. Whether you're a manager, whether you're hands-on keyboard as a lower level employee or something like that, it's a good way to keep everyone in the initial realm.
Great, guys. And I think that soft skill point is important. One of the philosophies we have is how you actually develop your soft skills is one of the tricky parts, right? You tend to do that just generally through life and through life experiences. But our philosophy is, if we get our students working in a project environment where there may not always be clear-cut steps about what to do next, you have to sort of think critically, you have to communicate with each other, you have to adapt and sort of adjust your approach, you inherently start to develop those softer skill muscles. And so in a lot of our assessments of our students, we put a big focus on soft skills as well as the technical skills that you need to know. So yeah, totally agree on that front. What about things like programming? Is it important to know that side of the technical? Obviously, Efrain, you mentioned, you don't necessarily come from that technical background, but what about that common concept around programming and things like that?
Yeah, so it's funny because a couple of these questions that we were looking here, I asked some of my team members to understand a little bit more about what they thought, because they're all newer, or I have a couple guys that are newer to the environment and newer to the cybersecurity realm. I don't think coding is necessary. It can help, but it also depends on what you're going into. Cybersecurity is such a broad field that there's a lot of different things you can go into, right? If you're a SOC analyst, you may not necessarily need coding, but it could help. So I would say no, but if you do gain some of that background skill, it'll help you understand some of the problems a little bit more. It'll gain a little bit more of an understanding of the engineers if you get to a certain point where you have to work with other engineers. And it helps you understand what they're talking about, right? So we're talking about soft skills, but not every engineer has those. So if they start to talk a little technical, now you have that ability to understand a little bit of it.
Great.
Yeah.
Add?
And I agree. I agree with you there. I think you hit the nail on the head. There's so many broad ranges to cybersecurity. Everybody, those that aren't in the industry see cybersecurity as everybody's a hacker. Everybody's, diving into code. There are different aspects to it and different avenues. But I will say, I think a great way to dive into the role is just to get comfortable and familiar with all the different ways that you can be a cybersecurity practitioner, and then figure out what your niche or what you really, kind of want to dive into is, and really go down that path. But I would say it is very important, if you want to go down that more that technical role, to have some of those skills, at least a foundational knowledge and understanding to it. Python, SQL, very valuable pieces that I interact with on almost a daily basis, even as a manager. Being at least to have an understanding when you're looking at code as you go more into like the DevSec world, DevOps, things like that, and to kind of start being able to at least read the code and understand what's happening, is also important as you go along in your career if you decide to go down that path.
Yeah, and the last piece I was going to say, because he mentioned Python, which is the language I was going to say as well. And then if you start getting into certain machines and certain things, you've got Bash, Shell, and PowerShell. So those are the PowerShell for Windows or whatever.
Got it. Great, guys. Thank you for that. And just in terms of some of the challenges that a beginner might face in cyber initially, potentially, maybe you guys can think back to when you started in this world. What did you have to overcome? Was it a skill-based aspect, or was it sort of a mindset?
Yeah, I'll go first. I think, and I still feel it today. So for everybody on this call, when you get into this realm, even after hopefully signing up for the Harness Project, I still feel imposter syndrome a little bit, right? Like you get into these calls, or you get into these things. I mean, on this call now, we talked about Python and Bash, and some of you may not know what any of that is. And I couldn't fully explain it to you because I don't speak code either, but I know the backgrounds. But imposter syndrome, you just feel like everyone else in the room is smarter than you and you can't make a difference. But I don't necessarily think that's true, right? And Austin can kind of attest to this, because when I got to the company where I worked with him, I didn't have any experience and I was brought in to be a manager. But you have these skills and tools from other jobs that you've done, especially for those of you who are trying to join cybersecurity from a different field. You be surprised what you can add and what input you have to these different things just from experience you have and things right? If you have a cell phone every day and you work in your apps, something that is a basis of cybersecurity or just IT in general. So I would say imposter syndrome is the biggest one for me.
I think it's a great point. I would say the other side of that, for me, I think the biggest piece is just you really are under a water hose for really most, if not all, of your career. I still to this day am just constantly, learning and improving, even after being in the industry for as long as I have. You really have to shift your mindset that you're never going to hit that end stage where, oh, I know everything. I'm out ready to go out and just do my job and never learn anything again. This industry has changed dramatically just in the last 5 years. It's wild to me, the problems that we were tackling 5 years ago are not the problems we are tackling today, especially when you introduce things like generative AI, and you talk about, all the new major ways that you have risk in your space from introduction to new technologies, new, shifting to the cloud. You constantly have to be improving yourself. And so that's something that I would say is true for some fields, but not all of them. And so, coming into this industry, you may be coming from, a student space or maybe a space where, you're used to kind of studying and learning, and that'll definitely benefit you. But coming from maybe something where you're more stagnant is definitely something you have to kind of shift your mind a little bit and really be digging into different ways to do threat intelligence and threat gathering and understanding the risks of the day and really trying to improve yourself over time.
Great points, guys. It makes a lot of sense. And one of the things I've noticed is with our cyber students is those with that natural curiosity and tinkering nature, they tend to do really well. They tend to be motivated to want to keep learning and to explore that other tool, that other concept. And yeah, I think that goes a long way. We've just got some questions coming through. I just want to ask a couple off the bat. So Bradley asks, how much do you guys know about cybersecurity sales world? And perhaps if you do know about it, what are some tips to dive into that type of role?
Yeah, so I've worked with plenty of folks in the sales side of things, whether you're looking to be a true salesman or saleswoman, or try to focus more on like the pre-sales engineering side of things. We're actually walking through whatever it is your company's trying to sell. There are definitely a few different avenues you can go down that space. I would say the biggest thing, just from my experience, is that if you really want to succeed in that space, be passionate about the product and actually, believe that what it is that you're selling is actually doing what you say it is. There's a lot of, I would say, not really bloatware, but more of just, it looks really pretty, it promises a lot, but it doesn't really actually do what they promise, right? And you don't want to be the guy that has to peddle that. Be really passionate if you get on that space about what it is you're doing, really learn it inside out. Because if those that are really, like, you can just tell when you're in these kind of cold calls or intro scenarios that if somebody's really passionate about what they're selling, if they know the inside out of it and they really want to, show you why it's so great, those are the kind of salespeople that I tend to listen to and typically succeed.
Thanks, Austin. Okay, and there was another question here, which is, I guess, like a broad process or thought process that someone might go through when trying to get into cyber. This is from Amir. How would you rank the important things to work on in the order of landing a job or internship in cyber? So, what are the most important things to the least important, but generally you guys feel are required?
Yeah, so Amir, let us know if we're going down the wrong path here, but I'm going to answer it how I think you're asking. But I would say gaining your knowledge, right? Whether that be certifications, whether that be taking a course like the Harness Project or something like that, and understanding that entry level or baseline, right? And then from there, it's kind of what Chris said too, the tinkering, the background knowledge, or on the job type training, right? I hate people who put out application or put out job descriptions and say, hey, this is an entry level position, but we need 7 years of experience, right? So those things are not very helpful, but there's I don't want to say cheating ways, but there are kind of trick ways to get that experience, right? And I'm sure Chris is going to talk about this at some point. If not, I will. But like with the harness project, right? It's a training and a certification process, but it's also getting real companies that come in with the harness project and help you get some of that on the job training. You can say, hey, I have experience doing an incident response plan for a real company that's out there, and you have that background, right? That totally belongs on your resume once you complete a certification like this. But I think the important thing is to get that baseline first. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to go out and get a security plus or these job applications that say you need CISSP. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I think just that foundational background. They have courses like Harness Project and lower level ones if you want some other background, like Google does one or things like that. So that's a great way to start. But then getting those on the job trainings, hack the box, other type certifications like that, setting up a GitHub, all of those things that you can learn and do some of in the Harness Project, I think are important for that ranking, if that answers the question.
Thanks, Efrain. Thanks, that's great. And Austin, anything to add there, or do you generally agree?
No, I agree. And I was just telling somebody that I'm mentoring actually today at work that it really does. I hate to say this again, but it really does depend on what kind of role you're going for in the cybersecurity space. So kind of learning to get that initial understanding of what different avenues there are when it comes to the industry. There's a lot of different online resources that kind of walk through that, but you can never go wrong with something like harness projects or going through and actually getting a foundational knowledge. Because I believe there was even something in the comments earlier about if we'd be covering GRC topics over the course of the project. Having these foundational tools in your tool belt and understanding these foundations are going to help you no matter what avenue of cybersecurity you decide to go down. Having these technical pieces that we talk about in this program as a GRC analyst or engineer is huge, because you can actually go in and explain, okay, here's the compliance piece and the governance piece. I know the technical piece that falls into that, and really marry the two. I mean, that makes you a powerful candidate, very powerful. So getting the foundations is important. Understanding kind of the route you want to take with your career is important. You don't have to make the right decision off of that. You can get into something like a SOC engineer or a governance engineer, low-level, entry-level role, and start feeling it out. And at the same time say, hey, such company that you work for, is there an opportunity where maybe I can shadow or mentor in this other role that you have, and get a feeling for what really suits you best before you start really heading down where you want to advance your career.
This guy's great points. And yeah, one of the things we tell our grads is getting into that security analyst SOC type role is this like a starting point to open doors, because it's such a broad domain. You might find that, if you're highly technical and curious and learning some of the secure coding practices, you might go into that pen testing space. Others who, have probably come from a risk background or a, process policy background might go into GRC, etc. So there are a lot of different options depending on your style of work and what your preferences are. Okay, so just go through another Q&A question here. Andrew just asked, as a junior cyber analyst, so it sounds like Andrew's in a junior role, I have a strong understanding of CrowdStrike and to a lesser extent Splunk. Do I need to have deep or relatively deep networking understanding?
Yeah, I just answered this one in the chat. So I'll say that piece, but I think it does help, Andrew. Understanding like networking in terms of IP ranges and, like I said, the OSI model, logs, threat hunting, all of that stuff is gonna come in handy. Do you need to be an expert in it? Depends on what field you go to, right? Staying in that SOC analyst field or staying with something like CrowdStrike. As a cybersecurity analyst, yes, but if you're going into other areas like management or I don't know, even to an extent engineering, maybe it's not as important because you start hitting other areas. But one of those foundational skills that could be really helpful, and I know someone is either going to ask, or I'm not looking at the question, but someone will definitely ask what certifications are useful to like get entry level. And there is a Network Plus from CompTIA and things like that, and it's useful to give you a foundational understanding of things. Harness Project does work with some of those pieces, but that is like one of the easier certs that gives you that additional background. It's right above, what is it, CompTIA's A plus, which basically teaches you the insides of a computer, but it gives you that background. So there's that skill level, and then I think up from there is Security Plus, which is usually one of the first ones I recommend as well. But Austin, I know you were going to talk. Go ahead.
Now, I mean, you know, starting out as a cybersecurity analyst, it's kind of my bread and butter. And when I hear you talk about, you know, CrowdStrike and Splunk, those are great tools to have in the tool belt. A lot of companies use them, and what I was going to lead to with it, with kind of your answer there is that, again, you know, as you go and you start getting experience in your career, you're going to find that different companies use different tools, but it's really powerful if you see they usually try to drop keywords in those resumes, say looking for somebody with, you know, CrowdStrike experience or Splunk experience. It already helps that you have experience in the space. So they don't teach somebody else. When it comes specifically to the networking piece that you were kind of highlighting, some of the most powerful, I would say, staff engineers that I've seen are those that have been in the career a long time, have a broad knowledge when it comes to networking. I'm not saying you need it. I would say I'm pretty average when it comes to, you know, overall networking. Took a basic networking plus course, so have a bit of that foundational knowledge. But I've definitely known a few engineers in my time that have powerful networking skills, and it really helps you when you're talking about looking at network level security, working with like firewalls, next gen firewalls, DLP space. It's good stuff to have in the tool belt.
Thanks, guys. Just on the next couple questions are around transitioning, and there's a couple here from, it looks like, project managers. So Gopi is a IT project manager with a focus on application development. I'm transitioning into cyber management despite lacking experience in infrastructure and networking. What should I focus on, and which certs are recommended for this shift? So we've covered a little bit of the certs, but for specifically a project manager, because Gopi asked that, and also KL further down, is in a healthcare project manager role with minimal coding experience. And so, yeah, this might be related to both of you guys.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll kick it off just to say, having project management experience coming into anything cyber related is huge, because we do project management every day. Especially as you get more of a senior type of role, you're constantly having to not just manage projects, but really own the outcomes to it and define what those steps are to get that across the board and reach that deadline. So if you already have that experience, you're going to succeed if in a, you know, kind of more leadership role as your career moves on. Now, how you transition that, really, it depends, again, you know, kind of where you're transitioning from. I heard a few different scenarios in there. The biggest thing is, I would say, if you're coming in as a project manager, is to understand where your company's at today. Get with, you know, whether it's a staff engineer or somebody that's, you know, handling a lot of the cybersecurity architecture space, and really learn to understand what the ins and outs are when it comes to how everything's configured, what the gaps are, known gaps, unknowns. Talk through kind of what's already set up, so that way, you know, as projects start coming down the pipeline, how it kind of fits into the overall space for, you know, for your client or your company.
Hmm. Thanks, Oscar.
Yeah, I'll piggyback here a little bit too, especially for, if I butcher it, I'm sorry, but Gopi, talking about that transition, and KL to a point, project management experience, like Austin said, it's super important. I don't have a day where I don't do some form of project management, right? And I think you get like a little bit of a cheat way into cybersecurity or any realm you want to get into, because project management switches through every job, every situation, anytime you're at a management level. You know, you're going to end up using some type of Excel spreadsheet or PowerPoint or something to explain a project to your leadership, to your team if you manage people, because you need to show the steps of how to get to those certain things. So you guys have a little bit of a leg up when it comes to that. I would definitely push the fact that you have a lot of project management experience and show that piece, because I think that will also help getting you into that position. You don't necessarily need a lot of cybersecurity experience to know project management and vice versa. So you can use that to get your way in and then learn everything you have to on the job kind of things, or with programs or trainings. But it's a good way to say, hey, I can do this job early, because you're just managing people and processes and projects.
Yeah, great point. Thanks, Efrain. We're going to have one more question on certifications because it's up here, and but I feel like we've probably touched on this quite a bit. But just generally, I mean, Hans asked, how is it mandatory to have a cybersecurity certificate such as CEH? I'd like to add to that question, how does your certifications fit into your overall, job search collateral, so to speak?
Yeah, so we touched on the certification piece a lot, but I do think cybersecurity and IT are really notoriously bad when it comes to job descriptions for certifications. And I bring that up because once you guys finish getting a certification, or if you don't, if you do something like Hack the Box or one of these other things and you start teaching it to yourself, you're going to find these job applications or job descriptions that say CISSP for an entry level position or something like that, or like you said, CEH here. And I don't necessarily think they're really important, right? And Austin and I have done hiring together, and now we're at separate companies, but I can speak partially for him, and I know he'll chime in after this. But when I look at a resume, when I talk to a person, yeah, I'd love to see a certification there, but I also look at other pieces of that resume. As I talked about, I really like people who have this eclectic background. You may not have a lot of cybersecurity experience, but you have experience in sales and this and that. And all of that means something to me because it shows you can speak rather than just type away at a keyboard. If you have experiences like the Harness Project gives with working with other companies, that's important to me, right? If your resume even just shows, I created my own GitLab, or I created my own small app that turns a light on, or it doesn't have to do anything important, but as Chris mentioned before, a tinkerer is so important to me because that's what this is about. A new product comes out every single day. If you look at companies that are being bought and sold, and a company from 2 years ago that Austin and I talked about recently, Lacework, they were worth, I don't know, 2 billion last year, and now it's gone down because they haven't moved forward. Whereas another company like Wiz, they do the same thing, but Wiz just got another, I don't remember what it was, 80 something million, because they're continuously moving forward and doing new things. That's what I care about, seeing that you're going to continue to do these new things and these certifications. Do I speak for every hiring manager? No. But I think the majority of managers who look at these resumes care more about that than the certifications checking a block. The only time it's really important is for like GRC or some of these audit type positions where it's required by getting audited. And then it becomes a lot more important.
Great insight. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just going to say 100%. I really want to hammer on that last point that you made, EJ, that it's not always going to be the case, because especially if you look at something like maybe you're going into like a federal space or a federal role, there may be some requirements where you have to have certain certifications. A lot of times I will see, though, that if it's a required but you're a really good candidate, they'll say you have X amount of days to get that certification once you're on the job. So I wouldn't say it's 100% a red flag for, I would say, good chunk of hiring managers. There's always going to be that few outlier. But the big thing that I really want to instill on anybody listening is that when it comes to certifications, think of them as a tool to showcase your experience. If you have a lot of experience and not a lot of certifications, that's okay. But if you don't have a lot of experience and you don't have any type of higher education or higher learning, then you may have to rely more on certifications to show that you can do the role that they're hiring for. So think of it less as a requirement and more of, how do I sell myself to the hiring manager? And if that's something, if you get an interview, That's where you kind of come in and shine and say, I may not have CH or whatever, but here's the on-job experience that I do have. Here's how that translates. Here's what, I'd be willing to do if I needed to get that certification, or, here's the knowledge I can show you that I already have. So just want to kind of shift your mindset a little bit. It's not always a requirement, but you have to use it as a tool to show your experience and what you can bring to the table.
Thanks, mate. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And just on a tangential aspect of, the toolkit or the collateral that you're showing hiring managers, Jacob asks about try hack me and hack the box and those types of platforms. What would you guys recommend is the best way to display those types of experiences in your resume? And what have you seen from people who've done those types of learning?
I've honestly seen quite a few people, put their try hack me certifications or hack the box. I personally never felt like I needed to in my resume, just because I do have different sets of experience where I talk through different aspects of those kind of skills. But it is a very powerful thing that you can put on there if you're lacking in other aspects on your resume. It's all about, how can I get my foot into the door for that first interview? If you can get that first interview, you have really good soft skills, you have really good, technical skills or background, or you've done a harness projects course, you get that first interview, it's a very good chance that you'd be able to move forward. So how do you sell your resume to the point where you can get through to that hiring manager? If you need to add hack the box, those are great pieces. I've hired a few people in my time that have put that on their resume. So I wouldn't say it's a shoe in, but it's definitely a nice thing to add if you kind of need to beef it up a bit.
Yeah, I would say the best way to display it is, right, if you get the Try Hack Me certification, it's easy. You put it under either certifications or an education type heading or something like that. One of those little cheat tricks for resumes. So I have some of these because I was a recruiter in a past life. I'm not anymore, so don't ask all these questions about recruiting necessarily. Resume, you can put education and put try hack me, and right, if you're going through one of the certification programs, just put estimated completion, right? So estimated completion fall of 2024, or estimated completion September of 2024. We keep pitching the harness project, but once you sign up for the harness project and you know when those projects are going to end, I would put those pieces in there, right? Estimated completion date. Because the big thing is, nobody wants to start searching for a job right after they complete the certification, right? You want to start trying to do that just before, because you're already gaining those skills and the experience to be able to speak to that. But it's also showing that you're continuing education. So put in there that you're continuing that education, right? If you don't have a degree yet, but you want to apply for a job, most people say estimated degree date, so-and-so. Do the same thing for this type of thing. Try hack me, hack the box, all of those things, put an estimated completion date and it'll help.
Great, guys. That makes a lot of sense. Let's just go a little bit further with resume advice. What are some of the mistakes that you guys have seen when candidates craft their cybersecurity resumes? Just something to look out for.
So I will take the other side of what EJ was saying when it comes to anticipated completion date. Do not put a certification or some course that you've taken on your resume that you have not completed, and say that you are. You will be caught at least 90% of the time. The thing is that, yes, it's great to get your foot in the door. You show you have this great certification. If you get in a technical interview and you can't explain the basic principles of that certification, it's a telltale sign. So, there's a difference between embellishment and full on just, not telling the truth on that. So you find that middle ground, but definitely don't put a certification that you haven't completed on there as completed.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And then we'll go with all the basic ones, right? Check, double check, triple check your spelling, your grammar, word processes, products. Make sure you spell the product right and put capitals where they belong. I can't tell you like how many times you see things like CrowdStrike or logarithm with capitals in the middle of words where they shouldn't be and things like that. Like it sticks out, right? Especially to someone looking at these resumes who has that experience. But I fully agree with Austin. don't put a certification that you're like not in the process of trying to get, because there are a lot of times these managers, especially if they're like a technical manager or have worked with it a lot, they know enough about the product to know when you're kind of bluffing. And then always, 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 whatever's on your resume, be able to speak to it, right? A lot of people just hit keywords just for the sake of trying to get into a job. Like someone mentioned CrowdStrike before. If you go to SentinelOne, don't just put SentinelOne because you think they're similar. Like you have to understand it a little bit to be able to speak to it. So those are important resume tips, I think.
Thanks. Yeah, I just want to echo the spelling and grammar thing. We've had hundreds of graduates go through our programs over the years, and as part of our job guarantee program, at the end of the course, we always get them to submit their resume to us and their portfolios, just so we can review things and make sure that you're presenting yourself well as a security analyst or a UX designer, whatever the course might be. And yeah, just the amount of times it comes to us with these simple errors. You know, it's almost like walking into an interview with your shirt buttoned wrong. You know, like you're trying to present yourself in a way that shows that you're diligent, that you care about, you know, your work, you care about how you present yourself. These are the things that hiring managers will look for, and they're just easy red flags that, you know, when you have 100 applicants, you'll miss out because of something simple that can be fixed. So yeah, and there's no real excuse, especially even if English is not your first language. There's a lot of great translate tools and grammar assisting tools, ChatGPT, etc., that can help. So cool. Thanks, guys.
GPT, here comes the million AI questions.
Here come the AI questions. So Amir asked a couple questions. You know, would you guys recommend starting a home lab for a beginner? Have you seen that work well? And then his second question, which we'll get to afterwards, is, you know, what are some interesting projects that people can work on independently that will help build their experience and impress recruiters?
You want to go first?
Yeah, so it's actually something I ask in my interviews is, you know, what do you do outside of work hours to, you know, improve your security skills, or, you know, how do you stay in the know? And I'm always impressed when somebody tells me they have a home lab or they tinker with stuff at home. It just shows that you actually have a passion for it. You know, I'd say, you know, working with like Raspberry Pis, or you know, having home server setups that you're constantly messing around with, firewalls. eh, They're all very interesting in different ways that you can kind of play with your skills when it comes to, you know, the security space. Spinning up and it's, with the cloud, it's easier than ever. You spin up your own instance in AWS and start poking around and doing something like, you know, Red Canary, red team testing or something. Um, Very cheap to do, and honestly, it's pretty fun. You know, especially as you start getting more into your, you know, your knowledge path. If you want to go down that route of doing some kind of ethical hacking or, you know, red team pen testing, getting to understand how some of those, you know, different tools work, it's pretty cool. So if somebody told me that, you know, oh yeah, I have a home lab, I have an AWS instance I run, you know, tests on, I work with Red Canary, that shows me you're passionate and it's not just a 9 to 5 job for you.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think, and I'll speak to the second question a little bit too with interesting projects, but I think everything Austin said answers that as well, right? An interesting project is just something you've done that shows you're passionate or experienced with these things. I can tell you, we interviewed someone recently. He set up an AWS server because he was the commissioner of his fantasy football league, and he created a way to display the fantasy football people in his league, and how, like, so that everyone can see it, because he ran multiple leagues at once and they were all friends but they couldn't all be in one league. Hearing that from an IT person is like, wow, this is something he really like enjoy. Yeah, maybe he enjoys fantasy football, but he really enjoys tinkering and playing and all those things we talked about before. And it's just a random, interesting project. It made him so memorable. And so did one other thing in the interview process that I can say for a joke later on. But like, it made him so memorable that after that first interview, we automatically pushed him to the next interview just because he was playing with something that he found a way to interject something that had nothing to do with the interview to show he had experience in setting up AWS servers and playing with things to get it to work. I think a home lab is a great idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. Again, it's just all on that curiosity, that tinkering, personality in me is if you've got the sort of motivation to do that, it's just going to help you. And in terms of projects, like if you need to find projects outside of sort of your own network, obviously Harness projects can help you. The next program we have some projects in conducting infrastructure vulnerability assessments for companies, conducting a risk assessment, which is sort of more of the GRC side of things. So it just depends on what you want to do. Most students come to us and do all 4 projects, but we do something from time to time, enroll students in single projects if they just want to get experience in one specific area. So just feel free to reach out if that's of interest. Got some questions in the chat that I'll just jump to now. So who's this from? This was from, I believe, Carlos. I want to know the answer. So what are your thoughts, guys, on sort of age-related bias in the cybersecurity field? Is this something that people should be concerned about, or how they should, particularly for Carlos, who's 65 years old and is a certified teacher?
Yeah, it's tough to say. I think it depends on the hiring manager again. But overall, I would say no, just because this is a field along with IT that it's easier to show your experience than it is to worry about your age. If I go into an interview, I don't care how old you are. I don't care what jobs you did before. It's the experience, right? Unlike sales, where people tend to look for maybe a younger, I don't want to say spry, but someone who's willing to fly 75% to 100% of their time, right? That would be more of a young man's game, if you wanted to call it that. But I think cybersecurity has that benefit where, are all of the jobs remote? No, but a lot of them are remote for the most part, or at least hybrid to this point. So it benefits, someone who could be older but has experience, or even if you don't, you gain that experience. It's going to be something that you can speak to this better, and the age don't matter, at least in my opinion.
Thanks, Efrain.
I agree, and I do have firsthand experience. EJ actually remembers I did actually have a 50-year-old intern that I took a chance on and hired a few years back, and I don't regret it, because just because of your age doesn't mean you can't learn something new. At the same time, the way I would describe it best is that if you don't make that your sole image, right? If you don't focus solely on that, but you're able to do the job, it doesn't matter what age you are. That's not always going to be the case, like EJ said. When it comes to certain hiring managers, they may be looking for somebody that may just looking for somebody to build them up in their career more in a long-term capacity. But all that to say, there's going to be hiring managers like me that say age is just a number. If you can do the role and you're passionate about it and you're willing to learn, let's do it. Let's sign up. So I would just say, as long as it's not that you don't make that your sole focus and your sole identity, then I think you're okay.
Yeah, great. Well put. Hopefully that helps. I think it was Carlos and Terence actually with that question. We've spoken a lot about how to get noticed to be invited to an interview, but what about what happens when you're in the interview? And I'd love to get your advice, guys, on typical interview questions to prepare for, some tips you might have for people when they're answering questions in an interview. Where would you suggest people start in preparing for their interviews?
Yeah, I love this one. So I'm going to put 3 links in the chat because we were prepared for this question. And I'm not saying these are going to be the questions you get asked, but they're really good ways to brush up on interview questions. You could just Google it too, right? Top 50 cybersecurity interview questions or whatever the case is, and you'll get those basics. Uh, but just understanding and knowing, hey, like they're going to ask some technical stuff. If you don't know, say you don't know, but you'll find out, right? Never just say I don't know, or never try and BS the answer. I don't know, but I'll find out. I don't know, but if you pick me, I can find this out. If you have a great way to parlay that into a different question, right? Like, I don't know, but how would someone who is coming into this position and doesn't know the answer to that find that answer? Or who's the most experienced on the team that I could learn from, or whatever the case, right? But those questionnaires are going to give you a great foundation, and probably better than anything I can tell you right here.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, when you talk about more of the technical questions, a lot of the times those technical questions, depending on what kind of role you're going for, are going to be more critical thinking, and really try to gauge your core foundations and your core, philosophy on technologies and the actual true nitty gritty pieces. So you may find at times there's going to be some hiring manager, some techie guy on there that's trying to, ask you questions that you read once in your Security Plus training or something, or what what cryptographic code goes to this. You may encounter that, but really one of my favorite questions I love to ask in technical interview is take a green world environment. It's fresh. There's nothing there, and your company's building a product. Tell me the three core things to secure that environment the most that you'd start going down and tackling. So those kind of questions where you're putting more of the spotlight of saying, what do you think are what are the most important things to go and tackle first, or what are the key critical pieces to go and identify? Those are the kind of questions I feel really gauge the interviewee the most, and really kind of understanding where they're at from a technical capacity. So those are the kind of questions I would say that really kind of spend some time, and again, depending on the role, but it really spend some time kind of thinking, okay, if I get asked these basic questions or these foundations, like EJ put those links in the chat, how would I answer that? Or if somebody asked me this question, but more of a story or more of a short story of how do I answer, don't sit there and freak out. Just take a breath, kind of think through it real quick. It's okay to take a second, really think through your answer before you deliver it.
And guys, what about a scenario where someone has to maybe describe some previous project experience they've worked on? Are hiring managers going to ask people, tell me about an experience that you've had doing X in the cyber domain, and what typically have you found the best responses to those types of questions?
Yes, I mean, to kick it off, I would say one of the most common questions that I've always gotten is, tell me a time when you've had to deal with, a coworker or a client that didn't have the same mindset as you, or, didn't share your opinion. How did you win them over? And really, you talk through your experience. You don't have to be in this industry long, even at a junior level, to come across when you're going to be working with an end user. Or if you're like me, you started in the IT space before transitioning to cybersecurity, where you're working with, somebody at a law firm or whatever that has either tech, issues, doesn't really know tech well, or they're really hard headed and it's their way or the highway. Talk to your experience, and and you might explain an issue, and maybe you didn't quite get them over to your side, but explain why you did what you did. Explain all the ways you tried to tackle that issue, and explain why it was important. Approach it from a cultural perspective. Why security is important, what you did to try and win them over. Those are typically how I try to approach those kinds of questions.
Thanks, Austin. Great. And Samuel has followed up with the question, which I'd love to ask you guys, and this is not related to your children, but what keeps you up at night in relation to cyber?
Oh man, Samuel, this is a horrible question to be asked in an interview, so I can understand if it flustered you. It's extremely broad. But if I could only give you one thing, it's, do we have the right processes in place to be able to handle a breach or an incident or an event, right? Those are three very different things. An event and an incident are not the same, and a breach is, oh crap, everything's hit the fan. But in today's world, understanding that there is no such thing as if you get hit, but when, right? Every company has to understand they're probably going to get breached and there's nothing you can do. But you can help fix that breach, close up the holes, close up the incident issues, and take care of things and have the right processes in place. So that would be my biggest thing that keeps me up at night, not the breach itself, because honestly, at this point, I can't help that, right? With all these new tools and all these things, I can't help that. I've already done everything I possibly can. But do I have the right processes? Do I have the right policies in place so that when it happens, we can fix it quickly and hopefully minimize the damage? To me, that's what keeps me up every night.
Great points. Anything to add, Austin?
That's a really good one. The other side of that answer is that why that breach is happening. Really, it's a buzzword, but the big thing is generative AI. And that's not just because it's this big unknown thing. I want to share a statistic with you all that over the last year alone, we've seen 168% increase in novel cyber attacks since Gen AI was introduced. And what that means is these are never before seen, customly programmed cyber attacks against individual companies. And why that's scary is it is now easier than ever to get your hands on a specific exploitation or malware to go and do an attack. There are malware as a service. There's Gen AI on the dark web. I can't remember what the name is top of my head, but that you can buy for $50 and conduct an attack on a company. I mean, it's scary because it's not the old way of thinking where, okay, this new, 0-day came out, like Log4j that came out a few years ago. Here's all these indicators. Go plug them into your security tools. Okay. And then, go back and do the review to see if you were popped before you came up with your indicators. Most oftentimes now, there's no indicators. There's nothing you can do beforehand unless you have just as powerful a tool on your side, aka some type of AI or machine learning tool that can understand what your baseline is and what your network actually is on a day-to-day basis and understand what an anomalous attack is. So that kind of really dives into more of like the technical piece of understanding your network, understanding your environment. What is anomalous traffic? What's that spike you see in the logs? And being able to identify that quickly and start kind of digging down that rabbit hole. But they're very important things that really does keep me up at night because you never know what the next thing is going to be.
Yeah, it's definitely a changing world, and I think part of the reason there's such an increase in demand for people who get this world, and particularly if you can bring any AI experience together with your cyber experience, I think that could be quite valuable these days. Okay, and just moving on, guys, I wanted to talk a little bit about networking. What would you guys suggest is some strategies to really help someone effectively network in this industry? How do you guys do it, and how has it helped you in your careers?
Yeah, I mean, we've said this multiple times, but Austin and I worked together before this, and we've ended up here at the Harness Project together because of being able to network, right? Chris said, hey, did you know anybody who has experience that maybe could help do this? And Austin was one of the first people I thought of. I think a lot of you are doing it now just by being on this call, right? You're gaining some background, you're gaining some experience, and you're meeting other people with like-minded interests. And I think that's the biggest part of cybersecurity. It's still a really small community. It's still very personal, where you can go 5, 6, 7 jobs and probably see someone that you knew from a job before. So I think that LinkedIn, sending each other invites, looking at the names on this and just sending each other invites because you all have like-minded experience, attend local events, become friends with classmates from the Harness Project or some of these other things that you do, and you guys will start to learn more about each other and more about the community as a whole. Not everybody can show up at DEF CON, right? Even though Austin and I have met at DEF CON even randomly at one point. But there's local communities like B-Sides and a couple others where you can just Google them and see. Join Reddit. If you do not have a Reddit already, I would advise you sign up for one today, and sign up for like blue team, red team, cybersecurity threads. Those things are so important, and you'll see so many people on there, and you'll see the name over and over and over because they're all talking to each other. And that's a great way to network, just to find extra cybersecurity friendships, but it's probably a way you'll find a job in the future. It's a way to help you get a promotion in the future and just grow your environment.
Austin.
Yeah, no, a lot of great points. I think really, attending those local community events, team events, getting connected into, different, I would say, networking pieces like InfraGard, for example. If you're US based, InfraGard's a great one I'm a part of. Or working through Discord, Reddit is another great one. LinkedIn. I mean, LinkedIn, I feel, yes, at times it can be kind of over stimulating just because of how much, you get hit with different things. But I can't tell you how many times I've had somebody reach out to me on LinkedIn and say, hey, saw you at this and this event. Just want to reach out and say, hey. Sometimes it starts as a sales call, but maybe more often than not, it's really just a great connection to have in the future, because you never know, especially in this, economy, when a furlough might happen, or where, your next job might need to come from. And having those connections and those capabilities through LinkedIn, through Discord, through Reddit, and through your local communities like InfraGard, it's really powerful to have, because if you don't burn bridges, you're more than likely going to be able to find your next role without ever having to put a resume in, if you're well enough known in the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Here. I think networking is this big term, but it's just, if I think about my own career, 80% of my roles were through people I knew, through connections. It is, generally for entry-level roles, yes, you need to do a lot of sort of legwork in the initial days, but then if you can start to spread your connections and networks and relationships once you're in a role in cyber, it makes a big difference. So everyone that has joined here today, I think you're doing the right thing by getting to know people. And one of the things in our program that we have specifically designed to assist with this is, for every one of the projects in the course, you have a different mentor. So instead of one mentor for one course, like a lot of providers, we get you exposed to 4 different mentors over the 4 projects. And the idea is that you can start to build your network and also learn from different perspectives from the different mentors that are on the course. So you'll meet Efrain, you'll meet Austin, you'll meet 2 others as well. And that can be a great starting point, because we've had a lot of our mentors from other courses end up hiring students out of our program as well, if they happen to have a role available. So you never know where the next opportunity will come from. So I always try and tell students joining our program, or just generally, you got to put your best foot forward, because you might get tapped on the shoulder from a mentor or someone else. So just something to think about. Okay, and I know, Austin, you mentioned a couple of places that were great for mentoring, for networking. Any others beside, like, any specific conferences or specific websites that might assist with this? Is there a Reddit subgroup or subreddit that you frequent?
Yeah, there's 3. I mean, it depends again where you go, but like I said, Reddit, look up Blue Team, look up Red Team, look up Cybersecurity. Those are very basic ones that you can join. And then it just starts to depend on what your job is and the products, right? We use CrowdStrike. Someone mentioned it before. We just recently switched to it from SentinelOne, so that's why I used a couple of those keywords. But join those subreddits, because it will be very easy for you to learn the product more there, but also you see, like, employees frequent those a lot. And if you ask good questions, you'd be surprised. I can say, in Redzone, where I work now, we hired 2 IT guys because they worked for a company that we had a contract with, Mosul. It's an MDM, right? Very small MDM, but there was no NDA or anything like that. Don't try and go get me in trouble. But they they just knew background, and like we saw talking to them every day. We were in the Reddit groups and they were answering questions, and how thorough they were. Those are a great way to do it between Reddit. Um, a question, I'm gonna steal his thunder, but a question Austin used to ask all the time in interviews were what threat field, I mean, like what cybersecurity or IT things do you follow on a regular basis in your personal world to understand like new threats and things like that? Twitter is always a great answer for something like that. Like you said, LinkedIn, joining those groups on LinkedIn, like the cybersecurity, I think it's CFI or something like that.
Mhm.
But those groups are a great way to say like, hey, I'm keeping up with the day to day, and you can see other people there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And from the Discord side of things, which I'm a big Discord user, I love Discord. There are two key groups that if you want to hit me up after this, I'm happy to give you invited to. But one of them is cyber jobs hunting, which they actually do resume roasting if you're into that. But it's 13,000 members. It's very large. It's global. Very great resource there, especially if you're looking for work. Another community on Discord also is Security Blue Team, also about another 11,000 members, also global. Great opportunities and topics that are going on in that space. Great way to keep in the loop as to what training and certs are kind of trending, security news, general conversation with security practitioners. Awesome stuff there.
The last cheesy comment I have though is the only group that is going, the best group is going to be the one you actually follow and like be a part
Mm-hmm.
of. Don't just join these Discord or Reddits and then never look at them again.
Mm.
They're really important to follow along with. And personally, my best group is the Signal or Telegram chat I have with like 10 people that I used to work with.
Mm.
Austin's a part of it. We have 4 or 5 other managers that are a part of it. And now we have all since moved to different companies.
Mm.
But it is where we've talked about products that we're all testing. And we've made purchases on products by just chatting with each other and talking about the different things it's done and what we've seen.
Mm.
We've found out about different phishing scams and things like that from conversations we've had, because it has managers, it has low level guys. So that is that networking piece, just showing you right away what it is.
Mm.
And then, like I said, B-Sides is a local conference, and DEF CON is a not a local conference. It's in Las Vegas, and yes, you can get into some trouble with that one, but it's not very expensive and great way to meet a lot of random people that will teach you a lot about the cybersecurity world.
Awesome, guys. That's
Yeah.
a wealth of knowledge there. I think definitely check those places out. And you're right, you have to engage with the communities. There's always generally one or two thought leaders in those communities that if you can establish a connection with, that could open doors for you as well. So I want to just jump, we're coming towards the end of the webinar, but I wanted to talk a little bit about this concept of a cyber portfolio or a body of work, which is probably not as common in cyber as it is in some other areas like design. But I'm curious to hear from you guys on how you would go about demonstrating project experience or project work that you've done. Perhaps it was at a previous firm that you worked for. How do you package up some of that experience into something that you can show another hiring manager?
Yeah, so just to start, I think that is tough sometimes because you do have to tackle, especially in the cybersecurity space. I myself came from a very large critical infrastructure and kind of government contracting space. So a lot of stuff that you work on in your career might be proprietary information that you cannot take with you. So how I would say you approach building a portfolio for yourself, what I've done is, part of my resume and also just kind of a project that I keep going on my own machine is what different projects I've been working on over the time, different companies. Obviously, in some cases you can't fully disclose them, but talk about the key core pieces that you brought to the table that you helped drive to succeed. I think a great one that, EJ and I both talk to on a regular basis is, when we built a mentoring or an internship program back at the job that we worked at together, where we built, I think we had 19 to 23 interns at one point, as part of this program. And that was really just something you're really proud of and you want to be able to talk about. So being able to showcase that, not just on a resume, but really be able to talk to it and remember it. So not just, having kind of like that level resume piece, but also keeping that file where you really kind of log some intricate details so you can go back and do it again is important. So I would say, to capstone that answer, find projects or accomplishments or ways that you can kind of showcase the value add that you brought to the table and how it improved that organization as a whole, and how you can bring that to your next role, and then be able to talk to that clearly and effectively with that hiring manager is important.
Projects you've worked on that you're not allowed to speak about, you're only not allowed to speak about specifics. And I think that's really important, because what you did to get those projects done is really important, and that shows your experience. So it's the same thing I would say about like AI we were talking about before. You can't put specifics because AI saves it all. Just like that company, right? That NDA is for those specifics, but you should definitely be able to talk about the things you do. I tell my employees you should have a book or whatever you want to call it, like good notes or a notepad, something, and create your own operating system, right? Austin's operating system, Chris's operating system. And all that is all of the things you've done to improve your company. If you created a phishing program, if you created, if you stood up new software, new projects. You can't speak on the names, but you can speak to what you did. And that I Love Me book, I Love Me file, like you talked about, Andrew. I feel like Andrew definitely was in the military to say something like that. But yeah, those I Love Me books are really important, and they help you show that body of work. You just need to show a little piece of it. I knew it, Andrew. I'm in the Army as well, so but those are the things that are going to get you that job. Put in there that you stood up this new program. Put in there that you created an internship program. If you didn't do any of that stuff, but you created a new policy, put it in there. They'll ask you what kind of policy you created, and you don't have to speak to specifics, but you can say it. And that policy could be something you asked AI to create, like we did. Recently, we created our AI policy by asking AI to do it. But now I read it and cleaned it up, and I created an AI policy. That's one of those things where you embellished a little bit, but you're showing that body of work, and that's impressive, right? To be able to speak to your projects is really, really impressive, and that's going to help you get to that next file.
Thanks, guys. Awesome. One of the things we try to include with our course is, obviously you're doing projects, but what's the point if you can't tell anyone that you've done them? So we have agreements with all of our company partners that you can discuss the projects that you've worked on with us. We just give you a little bit of support to omit any confidential information, or particularly if there's a critical vulnerability found, obviously that stuff gets patched before it goes out as sort of any information. But yeah, we work with you on that throughout the program. So hopefully that helps clarify those things. So we've got 15 minutes left. Any final questions, please submit them through the Q&A button. Otherwise, I'll spend the last few minutes talking about our next program that we have coming up. I'm happy to answer any questions on that might come up. But before I do that, just going to check if there's any last questions that we haven't covered. Oh, actually, one thing I'd love to ask you guys is, any final advice that you have for the audience that we haven't covered, or something that you feel passionate about that you wanted to tell the crew here in relation to getting into cyber, career in general?
Yeah.
I would say the biggest thing, I'm sorry, EJ, go ahead.
No, go first.
I was just going to say, the biggest thing is don't, whether you choose to join Harness Projects, which I really hope you do, because I think it's a very powerful course and a great way to get hands-on experience, or you don't. My biggest advice to you is don't be afraid to take the job that gets your foot in the door and gets you that experience that you need to get to that role that you really want. I myself went a different route than a lot of people did. I started out in IT. I worked frontline phone call for Dell for a long time. before I started working my way in the cybersecurity space. And at the time, I didn't appreciate that job. That job, I thought was just the worst thing in the world. But it's the skills that you pick up along the way that you learn to appreciate down the road. And there's not one way to get into the cybersecurity space. It's very easy when you talk about things like, oh, I went and got a bachelor's degree and I got my certifications. That's great on paper, but if you don't have experience, it's really hard sometimes to sell that to a hiring manager. So getting your experience foot in the door, which is why I really love what we're doing here at Harness, being able to give you hands-on experience and being able to work on real projects that you put on your resume to get your foot in and get that first role, is so important. And if it's not that way, going and getting those entry-level jobs elsewhere to lateral move across into the cyberspace, do what you got to do. Because if you really are passionate and you're not in it just because it's the it thing right now, it's so rewarding today. I never thought I'd find a job that I actually really enjoyed waking up in the morning, even on the hard days, to go and work. But if you really love what you do, and if you're really passionate about what you do, it's not work. It's hard sometimes, but it's not work.
Yeah, I think Austin somehow stole the exact thing I was going to say. If you're eclectic, if you have a good welcoming background of all these different things, don't think you can't get into cybersecurity. It's really, really easy to transfer into these other skills. I think I'll attack it in a different way with two parting comments. One, we talked about resumes a lot, and I think one thing I always like to leave people with is tailor your resume for the job you're applying for. Don't just rinse and repeat. It's really important to look at those keywords that positions are looking for and put them in there. Yes, you may not have experience with SentinelOne if you've worked with CrowdStrike or some of these other things, but they are basically the same. So instead of saying, oh, I have experience with X, if the job description is for a different position, say I have experience with this type of thing. SentinelOne and CrowdStrike are different products, but you know what an EDR is or an MDR is, right? And I'm using acronyms now, so I apologize. But what those things are going to be. So talk about that. Don't just rinse and repeat your resume. You should have 20 to 30 different resumes in your thing that may only have 10 different words between them. But I think that will help you get that job. Don't just go into LinkedIn and click easy apply 50 times and think something's going to happen, right? And then the second thing I will say is if you are not using AI right now, you're probably already behind. And that's both for you as an employee and an employer, right? It's really scary. Don't get me wrong, because we did not want to use it right away. But as Austin brought up, people are using it to red team you, and people are using it to try to breach you and hack you for these companies. So you should be using it to try to defend yourself as well, right? And that's such an important thing. Know the things that people are using to try to breach you and learn a little bit about them. So when you go into an interview or even just working at a job, you have experience with something that they're using against you, right? We all get phishing emails, and you've all seen what's the comment, like the Nigerian prince that lost all his money and he's trying to transfer it, something like that, right? Those are not going to be there anymore in 6 months, in a year. They're gone. AI has increased the ability to have proper English in an email for someone that doesn't speak English as a first language. I don't remember the percentage. I put it for the last meeting, but we didn't talk about it. But it was something like 80-something% in a matter of months. So these things are going to improve so much. So you should use it to understand it, so that way you can defend yourselves with it. Those are my big points there.
Great, guys. Thanks so much. I mean, awesome wealth of insights. I hope everyone got a lot of value from what EJ and Austin have shared today. I'll just spend a few minutes talking about our next program that we have coming up before we say our farewells. And I'll put a link in the chat if you want to reach out and have a phone chat or ask me for any links that you might have missed today. So I'll just put this in the chat now and share screen briefly. Our next program is a series of 4 projects as part of our Career Launcher Cybersecurity course. Some of the projects are shown on screen here. So for example, we're partnered with Slave Check, which is an organization that helps to limit modern slavery, which if you haven't come across that topic, is a real issue in the world that isn't spoken about enough. We're going to be supporting them with conducting a web app vulnerability assessment, learning all about web app security on that project. You'll get a chance to meet the head of IT at Slave Check and present your audit report to them as well. That's just an example of one of the projects. We're also partnering with Courtroom 5. They're supporting people with helping them self-administer through the justice system, which can be quite complicated and expensive for those who don't have the sort of the finances to be able to, excuse me, go through that process. So yeah, these are the types of things. Every time we run these courses, we seek out new companies with new interesting project briefs and challenges. That particular project with Courtroom 5 is all about an organizational risk assessment. So learning all about what their processes and policies and procedures are around risk, around how they onboard and offboard team members, access controls, or you name it, we cover it. And the one project that we have, which is a simulated project, is an incident response project. This one here. Incident response obviously being really important. We can't work on a live incident due to the risks with something like that, and the timing of those things can't be forecasted, but we will be simulating an incident to go through how do we do the forensics, how do we go through the remediation steps, and learn all of the sort of professional processes to do that. And, you know, these are all going to be bodies of evidence of work, of experience that you have under your belt, so that you can demonstrate that to hiring managers once you're out there looking for work. We do partner with obviously mentors from various companies. You can see some of our mentors up on the screen here. Austin isn't on here, but we'll be adding him shortly. Or you know, as part of our mentor roster that we bring into projects when they're available. We partner with Pluralsight and TryHackMe, so this is all included as part of the course. You get access to these tools for 6 to 8 months. And so if you wanted to extend your learning in the niche area, you know, go further than what our course includes, you can absolutely do that with these providers. But we also integrate some of the key lessons from them into our project experience for you. They're great tools as well to just prepare for any CompTIA or similar certification exams that you might want to sit. So that's included. I mentioned the job guarantee program. Don't get a job within 6 months, we'll bring you back onto another project at no cost. We'll just keep investing in your development, your experience, so that we can help you get that role, that first role. So that's included. And finally, we haven't spoken about this, but one of the things we really pride ourselves on at Harness is we integrate all of the knowledge of our incredible mentors. And we have over 80 mentors now from the industry, from a range of different companies, not just in the US, but in Australia as well. Some of them from Google, Tesla, Atlassian, some of those big name organizations. And they provide us input on what is the employability competencies required for certain level roles in these areas. And so what we do is throughout each project, we assess our students on what level they've attained in terms of those competencies. And we map that to what the industry is expecting. And we're able to do that because we have mentors from industry. We don't just have internal academic staff, although obviously we have that academic side internally. And so, yeah, this is a tool for you, something to help give you the confidence to know where you're at, where the industry is telling you you're at. It's quite valuable to have another hiring manager tell you you're ready for this role, and to go out there with confidence and start applying for jobs. So that's really some of the intention behind this scorecard, and the certificates as well. This is an example of the certificates that we provide. So for every project that you complete, the company as well as your mentor will co-sign the certificate. They'll acknowledge that you've done a real project for them. And this is evidence that you can then put on LinkedIn, you can put into your interview process to tell your hiring manager that, yes, you've done a project for these organizations. And yeah, it's all above board. So just a quick summary. Hopefully that gives you a little bit more context on how our program is different. And always happy to have a chat to anyone who's interested, whether it's about doing our program or just general career advice. We're agnostic about that. So yeah, hopefully that's been helpful for everyone. Look forward to seeing you all at the next one. We'll probably have a new theme, a different topic that we cover. But yeah, we'll be in touch soon. I just want to say farewell to EJ and Austin. Thanks so much, guys. I really appreciate your time. And yeah, we'll see you soon.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you guys. Find us on LinkedIn and hope to see you in the Harness Project soon.
Yeah, it was fun. Appreciate it, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. All the best.